Oh yeah, okay. Everything okay? Everybody can hear us online. So welcome back, everybody. So we have a wonderful session ahead over the next 35 minutes, and I'm going to hand over to the session chair, Annette Cosgrove, who was the lead supervisor of of our colleagues that are going to be presenting in a moment. So I'll hand over to you.
Okay, thank you, Karina. Just firstly, I just introduced myself as a module leader for the MA in Teaching and Learning the Applied project, which is a new module, a new master's that's running here at ATU Galway. We kind of deliver it in a using blended format and using design thinking methodologies. So I'm delighted today to share the work of three of our students who are fellow colleagues, and they have some really nice information to share with you. And again, I suppose part of this is, I suppose why it's innovative is we're using design thinking methodologies to guide the research. So it's very much applied. It's allowing the lecturers to kind of develop solutions to education or problems that they have themselves. So I think you'll find these research projects really, really interesting. So I have three presentations here. So we're starting with Gabriella, and we're also going to have Doru and Luca to follow. So we have to watch our time. So we'll be just watching after 10 minutes for each session. So I'll just hand you over to Gabriella. Thank you, Gabriella.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gabriella Gliga. I teach in the School of Business Marketing here at ATU Galway, and the title of my project is a mouthful. Thank you to the academic advisors. Annette, Orla, Emer, and Noel have been very good in helping us along this journey. I'll tell you, I'll get to the title maybe at the end, but I'll tell you where this project started. Right, so this is where the project started. This noticing this disconnecting between what the young generation seems to be interested in, very supportive of environmental sustainability, very active in that regard, but at the same time we see behaviors such as the sheen holes that you see a sample of on your right, and probably every day, hundreds of those are uploaded on platforms such as TikTok. So where do we stand? And when looking at Gen Z and the literature around Gen Z, points to the fact that they are the most sustainable generation. However, again, I've noticed that is that really the case? And looking at my students, again, some questions appeared around where do they stand when it comes to sustainable behavior. So there is a disconnect or a gap in between what we say we value and what we pay lip service to, maybe when it comes to sustainability and our actions. So knowing something is not the same as doing, and valuing something is not the same as taking action. And obviously, we need to take action. So it brought me to this question of what our role is as educators and how can we have teaching experiences that encourage students to not only to think they're sustainable, but to actually be sustainable. So the project aimed to bridge this gap in between values and actions. And by employing design thinking, I tried to redesign a module here at ATU Galway in consumer behavior. And applying design thinking means that we are involving our students in the design, so they become co-creators of the module and what happens in the module. I'm pretty sure the vast majority of our listeners are familiar with the design thinking process, but it typically incorporates these 5 steps that you see on the slide. So we empathize with the group we're trying to design for, then we define and reframe the problem based on the insights we've gathered, then we ideate and we brainstorm solutions, we prototype, and then we test for that. So from a theoretical point of view, I anchored my research question of bridging that gap into the theory of planned behavior. And from an educational point of view, I stayed close to constructivism and humanism because that's where my teaching philosophy lies. So in the empathize phase, I conducted 2 focus groups with some of our students. a group from the 3rd year marketing and sales and a group from the 4th year marketing and sales. The 3rd year students haven't completed this module that I was redesigning, and the 4th year students completed the module in the previous year. Based on those insights, I tried to reframe the problem and try to walk in the students' shoes, so to speak, and understand what would they like in this module, what would prompt them to be really engaged with these issues around sustainability, and then brainstorm some solutions, some activities that I wanted to conduct in the module, and I'll show you some of that in a second. Developed a prototype and tested it to a certain degree. So from a methodological point of view, I collected qualitative data and I analyzed that through thematic analysis. So the first phase, as I said, empathize, it brought us to realizing that actually even the values of the groups of students I was dealing with weren't as aligned to sustainability as the literature says. So I have just 3 key themes on the slide here. But this came out of the focus groups. The students that I discussed with seemed to be quite detached from sustainability. It seemed to be something that they projected into the future, not my concern type of a thing. And they were saying things, well, we'll be more sustainable in the future when we have jobs. And it's something that it's not on our radar right now. They were quite skeptic around claims that companies have, and rightfully so. There is a lot of greenwashing, and there was some frustration and guilt and eco-anxiety as well. Things like, well, even if I wanted to be sustainable, what can I do? It's just me, it's just one person. The main barriers to sustainability were primarily price. So there was a very deeply held belief that everything that's sustainable is really expensive, and hence they're not in the market for that. They are focused on cheap. Secondly, being sustainable is inconvenient. And thirdly, even if they tried to be sustainable, the information out there is really difficult to navigate. There were also some drivers for sustainable behavior. Of course, within these 2 focus groups, so there were 20 students across the 2 focus groups. Even in these groups, there were some students who strongly believed in sustainability, and they were very sustainable, but they were a minority. It was just 2 or 3 of them. Then their family values had an impact. So if you were brought up to believe that you need to be sustainable, they tended to be more sustainable. Surprisingly, also for me anyway, they seem to believe that having lots of policy and regulations was a good thing, because they said if the rules are there, we'll just follow and we won't complain too much about it. For example, taking the single-use cups from the canteen. They just got on with it. And then the peer influence and the social norms were also important. So they were saying things like, if all those influencers on TikTok were promoting sustainability versus Shein hauls, maybe we would be more sustainable. Or if our friends were more sustainable, we'd be more sustainable. But they didn't seem to see this at the moment. So they said things like none of my friends are sustainable or care about sustainability. So based on all of this, I tried to reframe and ideate and create some solutions, also keeping in mind what they told me about what they love to do in class. So what activities they engage with, what activities they want to see education provide, right? So it was things like experiential learning they wanted to do as opposed to just learn facts and statistics. They wanted activities that were relevant to them. So they said things like, sometimes the case studies we look at or the examples we're given in class are not from our world. We cannot relate to that corporations, that's not part of our reality. So we have to make things relatable. Also, when it comes to sustainability, being positive was another huge theme, because typically sustainability is linked to a lot of doom and gloom, and hence all of that negativity maybe makes them avoid the idea of sustainability altogether. And also this idea that, if you want us to learn more about sustainability, don't just mention it here and there. Make it visible, make it part of our assessments, and make it part of all of our modules, as opposed to just occasionally mentioning it or using it as an afterthought. They said that in some modules, there was this chapter there towards the end where we mention it and that's it. So we have to do better. Based on all of this, I developed this persona, which is part of the design thinking process. I named her Convenience Chloe, and it's an avatar, a representation of what the students, what they are, how they behave, their motivations, their frustrations, and so on. And it's a good reminder when I try to think about what I'll do in class to look at Convenience Chloe and think, okay, how would Chloe respond to this? Would she like it? Would she engage? Would she care? Would it have an impact on her? So going back to the design thinking process, I empathized, I defined and reframed, I am now at the stage of ideation. I brainstormed some solutions based on what the students told me and based on my, approach to teaching. And then I developed a prototype. And this prototype was a series of activities that I wanted to implement in this module of consumer behavior. And I tested these activities with the fourth-year students. So I basically gave them a list of the activities. I explained what each of them were and how they would engage with them. And I asked them, would you like it? Would you not like it? Why? And so on. I also tested this with an expert in sustainability that had been teaching sustainability for decades now, also to get some insights from that perspective. I won't take you through all of the activities, but just to say that some of these activities went very quickly because the students told me, no, we don't like them, we will not engage with them, or things like, for instance, the diary challenge, they said, the consumption diary challenge, I mean, it's explanatory what it would do. They said, we would just do it 5 minutes before deadline and it would mean nothing, right? So I had to get rid of some of these ideas I had. And I stayed with the ones that they seemed to enjoy. Also, based on what they told me, I included other things. For instance, making sure that I covered the principles of sustainability well in class, because I assumed they knew them, but actually they didn't. Greenwashing awareness exercises, and then giving structure to sustainability aspects by including things like the SDGs, for instance. So to conclude, what have I learned overall? First of all, when we embrace design thinking, it can be very powerful. Having the students co-create and being very engaged from the beginning, it really empowers us as educators and empowers them as well. That sense of agency is really, really important. When we teach sustainability, clearly we have to move beyond theory. We have to create that emotional connection with our students, and it's going back to making things relevant to their lives, making things personal. Why would I care about this? Why should I, think about this? And of course, then we need to include sustainability across our programs. We need to have that helicopter view as opposed to this is what I do in my module and this is what you do in your module. They need to see that from a cultural point of view, our programs and our institutions stand for sustainability. And finally, yes, systemic change, we all know it, but again, surprisingly, students are supportive of that. So basically, if you want us to change, make us, right? That's pretty much what they said. So thank you very much. I think for sure we can only bridge this gap together. So if you have any ideas for anyone touching upon sustainability or teaching sustainability, if you think that some of the things you implemented work, please get in touch, because I'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic, Gabriella. I think we'll leave the questions until the end just because of time. If that's okay with everybody, we'll have 10-minute questions at the end. So now we're going to have Luca. Yeah, you ready to go? Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks very much. For the next 10 minutes, I want to just present a small study that I did as part of this module and teaching and learning. And it's my experience to attempt to enhance the learning experience of higher education students or cohort by diversifying the mode of assessment. So it's a small case study. But here's some background. So the number of students accessing higher education is increasing. We all know that. And yet, when we look at the stats as well, there is not only they're increasing in numbers, but they're increasing in diversity from many different point of views, in particular socio-cultural. So here you see some numbers, some stats from the Higher Education Authority. But you can see that numbers are going up. A lot of the students, obviously, in Irish higher educations are Irish, but there's also growing numbers in terms of other EU countries, as well as there is a substantial amount of students from non-EU countries. At the same time, there's an increasing dropout and non-progression rate that seems to be stable, if not slightly increasing over time. And also, if we break it down between universities and Institute of Technologies, and now we call them technical universities, we can see there are differences within gender and also between, obviously, the type of institutions. And for instance, here you can see that males attending Institute of Technology or technology universities tend to have a higher chance of dropping out or non-complete. Other important background concepts to keep in mind is that there's for some time, this is nothing new, there's growing awareness of the fact that people learn in different ways. We're individuals, but the system of one size fits all approach obviously has to change because it will not suit everybody. And I could open a big parenthesis here, a big fan here, and I'm sure most of. But as a response to that, and again, this is also nothing new, there's been an evolution, even though some would argue a revolution is needed, but an evolution of the teaching system and the educational system, which is towards being more inclusive as a response of this recognition of diversity. An example of such inclusive pedagogical models is universal design learning. So I decided to do a small study to explore the effect of universal design learning inspired assessment approaches in a cohort of undergraduate students in an Irish institution here in Galway, where I teach. And the objectives were to define groups of students with potentially different learning modalities, and then modify and deliver a series of theory and practical sessions with distinct assessment approaches, then obviously analyze and interpret the effect of such approaches on the students' learning. And this was done within a design thinking framework, which Gabriela explained really well, so it's really, really good. So I can move on and not need to explain what the design thinking process works. So moving on, so this is in terms of part of methodologies. I started with a few study groups, but the focus then shifted to the year 2. But I had year 2, year 4 of a BSc program, and also some master students of a taught master program. And initially, in order to identify potential learning styles or preferences, I circulated this Likert-like continuous scale questionnaire, where students were asked to put a tick along one of those continuous lines for each of the 4 categories of learning styles. So they didn't have to choose one. They could just see where do you see yourself. So visual, oral, auditory, read, write, or kinesthetic. That's the VARK model. Then this is the series of lectures and labs, some of the details of it. Without going too much into detail, you can see here that some were over a 6-7 weeks period. Some sessions were individual, some involved group work. And in terms of assessment, they included, as you can see on the right-hand side, one was an MCQ quiz, the other one was question bank, where students had to actually provide formulate questions that would be suitable to a certain activity. The next was writing a protocol for a practical aspect as a group. The last session was the students were given the option to choose which assessment they wanted to be, which type of assessment they wanted to be assessed with. So they had to choose between an MCQ quiz, visualization exercise, where they had to draw things, or a reflective statement. And finally, I set up a questionnaire with a number of questions to collect qualitative data, which was then analyzed also as with Excel, as I will show, just to summarize, just summary statistics, and then also used NVivo for attempting a thematic analysis. So here are some violin plots. So what you're seeing here is the distribution, so from bottom to top, so from 0 to 100. is the distribution of their preference for different learning modalities. So this is visual. You can see the year 2, year 4, and the masters, where you see that there is a blob towards the top. It means that a lot of students identify them. They identified as belonging to that group towards the 100%. The read-write style, well, there was some difference between the different cohorts, where the year 2, you can see that there is kind of distribution, both not necessarily towards the 100%, but some didn't identify themselves as read-write. Kinesthetic, it was quite consistent between the different cohorts. You can see that most of them score very highly for that, which is basically learning by practice. And then the oral, ultimately, you can see there is differences between different cohorts. I will focus on this group, the year 2, now going forward. But what this exercise was interesting to see that not all cohorts are responding the same way. This is my attempt to categorize then the year 2 cohort into groups. And this is bubble chart showing their preferences for each of the 4 modalities. And we can see that I attempted to identify groups. So we have non-kinesthetic, kinesthetic visual, kinesthetic read-write, and kinesthetic oral, because kinesthetic was a dominant aspect for most students. Then when they asked about their delivery preferences, so how the material was delivered, there was a strong preference from all the different groups towards the classic 45 minutes lecture. Assessment preferences, again, there was a strong preference for multiple choice questionnaire. But they all said also yes to have multiple assessment options. So they like the idea of having options, even though they all chose one thing. But said, I like to be offered the option. And then the challenges in terms of whether they found it easy or difficult, certain type of assessments. So you can see the MCQ quiz, the question bank, the group work. And what I will highlight here is there was no evident pattern, like I'm highlighting the blue here, which is kinesthetic visual. There's no specific pattern within the groups I've identified that they might prefer one type of assessment over another. Also, the thematic analysis highlighted that different groups also had very common buzzwords or identified commonalities, basically, between the different learning modalities that were towards, they found group work and interesting, engaging, and fun activities as their preferred learning experiences. So limitations of the study and future work. So the sample size was small and the experimental design could be much improved, which I will obviously do in the future iteration of this module. The assumption that a well-defined VARC grouping exists within the study is a limitation, because VARC model has limitations being heavily criticized, in fact. And I'd like to shift more about the abilities and try to identify what the students identify themselves as, what are their abilities and capabilities. And so I definitely think the exercise at the beginning of a module where you engage with the students and you try to gauge the diversity of your group and then try to adapt your teaching to that, that's something that I find very attractive. I want to explore more in the future. I will improve, of course, as a consequence of this, I will improve the first questionnaire to better define the potential learning styles, then structure the delivery and assessment around a more robust UDL framework. So to conclude, while no evident pattern was identified for a given VARC modality, it was clear that preferences, challenges, and skills varied at an individual basis. And there was a strong positive response by the students. They really like to be engaged. They appreciate being engaged by lecturer. They like to be present, as considered as part of the learning process, not just passive recipients. So very, very positive feedback I received on this. And it was, as a consequence of that the study resulted in a positive teaching and learning experience from all parties, so not from the students, for myself as well. I got to know my students better, to know that they are a diverse group, not just the students. These are some of the references I've used in this presentation, and I want to thank all those involved, the students, the teaching staff, and the peers. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Luca. That's a fantastic presentation. And I'm going to hand you over to Doro now, and then we'll have the questions and answers at the end of that session. Okay, thank you, Doro.
Perfect. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Doro Bobla. I'm a lecturer here in ETU Goli, Mechanical Industrial Engineering. For my project, in short, I've actually automated the assessment process for one of the modules that I teach, namely manufacturing process planning. For the ones who are not familiar with this, in process planning, we analyze different steps of converting a raw material into a finished component. To do that, we have to look at sequence of manufacturing processes. We have to look at production equipment. We have to select tools. We have to calculate parameters for these tools. There is a quality assurance element involved. We have to do documentation. And then at the end, we have to do a costing analysis. To do that, the students are given two parts, similar to the ones you see on the screen. One is a flat component. We call that a prismatic component. And the other one is a round one. We call this a rotational component. Looking at just a bit about the assessment strategy, this is divided in three continuous assessments. We have an exam and the project. Exam and the project are straight away, no problem with that. The same with the assessments, part of them, theory quiz, not a problem. This is controlled by Moodle. The second part, the process plan, this is where the student's activity is. If we're looking again at the feedback and marking, basically what the students have to do for the two parts that you're given, they have to prepare the process plan. They do the first part, they submit to me, I send them feedback, I send them mark, and then they continue to the next one, and then to the third one, and all three assessments and then used for a project. Everything was fine until a couple of years ago when I got more students to teach, and I didn't want to change. This was approached, the assessment was approached, because based on their feedback, everybody was happy to get individual feedback. All these assessments are linked, so the students, they cannot skip one to get to the second one because they all form the process plan. So I didn't want to change the way I was assessing them. So then I started to look at maybe automating the process somehow. So I look at virtual tools. First thing that I looked at, I was looking for a tool that can create a custom template. Basically, I didn't want to introduce a new app. There are so many apps at this day. So I just wanted to find something that is familiar to them. Next thing, text input capability. I wanted the students to be able to insert data into the assessment. Once the data is inserted, I want to make sure that I can actually use this data, and I can use this data on the background for some equations. Also, I want to be sure that I can run some scripts, such as if then conditions, based on what the students answer, to have different actions at the end. When everything was finished, I just wanted to find a way to collect the results, either Microsoft Excel, Microsoft List, some way to collect their answers. And the most important, to embed it in some existing teaching platform, in our case, to be in Moodle. Doing a bit of research, I actually found a combination. And that is PowerS with Power Automate, Microsoft List, and everything managed through Moodle. First thing that I did, folks, was to write a small app which is capable of producing custom parts for the drawings, for the students. In the moment, if I have 15, 20 students or more, then I need 40, 60 parts for each to analyze. To go around that, I created this app. They can launch it from Moodle, and in the moment they click on that, the app starts. If you look at the app template and my template, it's actually the same template that I use even on a weekly basis in class to deliver my notes. So I just wanted to be something familiar first thing. So they input their names and the last 4 digits of the student number. They click continue, and the first part is being generated. It has a name on it, and they can actually print it. And this part they use it to produce manufacturing drawings and then to do the process plan. Well, what happens actually on the background is a different story. So each dimension there is linked to their 4-digit number. There are no two students with the same 4-digit numbers. So it means that I can create a lot of variations of the same part, but all different. The same with the other dimension. Also, I've taken into account what happens if one of the digits is 0. So, for example, an if condition, if one of the digits is 0, then automatically assign a value of 4, and some other scripts on the background. In the same way, the second part is generated. So now I have the 2 parts finished. The drawings are ready. The students produce the CAD models, the finished manufacturing drawings, and then they start the first assessment. The first assessment, basically the same, is being launched from Moodle. They're asked for permission. SharePoint, this is just for me to collect the results. The assessment is launched. Again, the same template. And the students ask for name and surname. And also, there is a note saying that this assessment comprises of 2 parts, the theory quiz, the one that I mentioned earlier, and a process planning quiz. They click continue, and this stage, they're linked to the first part, the theory quiz. So the theory quiz is controlled by Moodle, standard Moodle quiz. I didn't want to, again, to reinvent the wheel. In this case, works perfect. So in the moment they click on start the theory quiz, brings them to Moodle, they complete the theory quiz, they close it, and they come back to this page again. Continue to part 2. Part 2, they're actually questions based on their reports. So they prepare a part of the process plan, and then they run the quiz. So they are asked, like in this case, review your manufacturing drawing and confirm the geometric tolerance on the drawing, for example. So what they have to do, they check their plan, and they answer the question. This is a simple question, a standard MCQ. Also, another level of question, they include 1 parameter. There are some simple calculation, or they're asked to search and input some values that I've selected for their project, for the project plan. Like in this case, they're asked to input a value of the raw material that they had to select themselves from a table that I gave them. And the third type of questions are more advanced questions. In here, basically, they will have to input their calculations, their numbers, to get the final result. Like in this case, they're asked to calculate the finished machining time for a certain feature of the part based on their data. As you can see, the all fields, input text, any values can be inserted in there, formulas on the background calculating the results. When everything is finished, they're given the option to go back to the start, or if they're happy, there is no way back from this page, they can submit the assessment and see the feedback and mark. This brings to the feedback and mark. So on the feedback and mark, if the answer is correct, they get a tick there, so they get full marks for the question. If the answer is wrong, then there is an explanation where to find the information they need to correct that and have it ready for next time. They get also the mark, and all of this, and like this, I have questions, I've assessments with questions between 10 to 20. When everything is finished, they check their feedback. Also, there's an option to print. In the moment they click print, they have a PDF generated of the feedback. And on the last page, they get their final mark. In this case, this assessment was marked only 90%. The other 10, I check their manufacturing drawings. Only takes a few minutes per student versus 15 minutes for a full report for that. In the end, on the other side, myself, I collect the results. So I use Microsoft List. So in the moment they click submit, everything is saved into Microsoft List. I know the name, each question they answered, the mark, and the date with the time and minutes when they submitted their assessment. For Microsoft List, very easy. We can synchronize with Microsoft Excel, and you can use a spreadsheet from there. So every time you open the spreadsheet, the results are updated. So the findings. This app was already implemented last semester with a cohort that I had. So I did a quiz at the end. So all the students, they found the instant feedback very good. They all said that it was great to have the information fresh in our minds, to go back and correct it rather than come back in a week or 2 weeks' time to remember what we did and to change it at that time. I've also asked them to rate this new approach. So I was happy. After the first one, I got a 4-star rating of this whole assessment. Talking to some colleagues, some lecturers, they said that having a model like this will be a deal. And here we're talking about scalability. It works the same for 20 students or 120 students. There is no limit in number of students that they can use this model. And of course, at the end, yeah, time saving. I saved hours and hours. So now I'm using this time and I'm looking at new activities, tutorials, in-class exercises using the same approach so everybody can do them. Also, it can be done as online in their own time. I just want to say a big thank you to our teaching and learning team here at NTU. Thank you for all the help, folks. And if you have any questions, either now or we'll discuss it later. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Doro. And that's a really great, just following on our keynote this morning, example of using technology to enhance the assessment process, actually. And again, like that, you know, if you're talking about Gen AI, that's a nice example there of how you can combat that by developing using Power Apps. So thanks very much. So I'd just like to thank the 3 speakers for sharing their excellent research. And it's really, I suppose, each project shows how each piece of research, you know, looked at the student voice and enhanced their own teaching practice as a result. So it's a fantastic work, and just to commend you all on your great work. So we're going to have a few questions now. If anyone has any questions, and we've the roaming mic. I think we can take it from there. Yeah. So have we any questions online about the research, or have we any questions in the room? Is monitoring online? Any online? Yes.
Laurie has a question.
Luca, nice to meet you. I've worked with you before. I have a question for you. The MCQs, the students said they liked the MCQs, yet this morning we saw MCQs, particularly take-home ones that they do online in their own time, are not secure and invalid. So how can we balance what they want with what we can do and what's valid within our assessment?
Thanks, Nori.
Thanks for the question. Yeah, that's a question that I asked myself when I was, you know, kind of regularly, but I guess a way to tackle that is that MCQ should not be the norm, that everything you do is MCQ. MCQ can be an option for one or a couple of assessment pieces, but also have other types of assessment. So I think the variety of assessment is important, to maintain a variety of assessment, and also try to collect feedback as much as possible from the students. The MCQ you can see is practical because you just look at the list of options, you say that's the most likely one. So, you know, it's kind of an easy assessment in a way. So I'm not surprised that they all chose that. But I think we have to evaluate also the benefits of them being asked, what do you prefer, or given an option. That's very empowering for them as well to not be part. So there are multiple aspects, not just the assessment itself. Yeah, so keeping it diverse, I guess that's the, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Luca. Any other questions? Yeah, we have a question here.
Hi again, just for Luke as well. And it looks like, that you created using the Microsoft tools to create additional kind of MCQ. And I'm just wondering why you went with, not using, because a lot of ELEs will have MCQ builders within it, which learners would already be familiar with, or using Microsoft Forms. It just seems a bit, more complex into building it. So I'm just wondering why you went with that, I suppose, with that route rather than using the tools that are already integrated into the VLEs.
Thank you. Maybe it wasn't clear. The Microsoft form was only to collect the questionnaire just to collect qualitative data about their experience, but the MCQs were done through Moodle. Yeah, they were. So I used Moodle for that. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Luca. Okay, have we any other questions? No, I just on Gabriella's, I found it very interesting about the students, how they all have these principles about sustainability, but then when they put it into practice, they're all buying, the fast fashion brands. I thought it was very interesting, that's our youth feedback. I think, is that it? Have we any more online? And I know we're stuck for time, so I think we'll leave it. And I just want to thank you and give you a round of applause. Thank you so much for sharing your practice.